I want to thank everyone for allowing me to be here tonight, particularly Arthur and Mike to invite me here. Thank you all for inviting me here. I think this is a crossroads in the history of medicine. Corporate medicine is driving us into the ground. The 18% of the gross national product, everybody wants a piece of the pie. They want a piece of the pie, and they blame us for it. Although we're responsible for 80% of the spending, we only get about 8% of the spending. So it's not physicians being the problem. And mockery and molestation, that's little keywords we like to use among friends here. The MOC and the MOL, I became engaged in the maintenance of licensure issue when I was at a meeting in Ohio 6 years ago, where one of the physician representatives gave a speech and mentioned the fact that this was going to happen in Ohio as the first place in the country where they were going to bind your licensure to a program of education which was going to be dictated by the Federation of State Medical Boards, another corporation, a nonprofit that makes $50 million a year. They've made their money selling tests, to the medical students, the Flex, the USMLE, and several other tests. So testing organizations make a lot of money. First of all, this is my medical school emblem. It was founded in 1457, has a long history. I trained in Germany. In Europe, there are no American boards of anything. People live longer, have less infant mortality. They have this unusual concept called preventive medicine that works really well over there. It's a socialized system, and as a medical student, I paid about $30 a month for all the health care I could handle, from eyes, ears, nose, dental, you name it, because those who didn't have money were covered. And in America, we have the same program. It's called Medicaid. People say it's the best health care in the country because there's no copay and it covers everything. So there's something to be said about the fact that, yes, health care exists in this country. There's an opportunity for charity to work, to take care of people, but the federal government is taking over everything and imposing upon us in so very many ways. We're under attack from all sides. You got to buy computers. We got the ICD-10. The AMA is supposed to represent us, but it only has about 13.7% of all practicing physicians as members. They've turned into an insurance agent and ICD sales, book sales. The boards, the ABMS and the FSNB are not your friends. They are founded to protect the public, to scrutinize physicians in every way, and that means we're always suspect to them. And they have tests that they can change willy-nilly. The ABIM has had failure rates as high as 33%, family practice as well in the last 5 years, and yet we don't have enough primary care providers. Who wants to be in a profession where you're practicing good medicine and find out that from today to tomorrow, because you fail a test, you might lose your license, your hospital privileges, or other demands upon you to enable you to practice medicine? Ben Franklin said during the signing of the Declaration of Independence, we must hang together or we will surely hang separately. This has never been more true than now in the United States for practicing physicians. The PPACA, the high-tech laws, we're supposed to be responsible for everything. If something gets billed false, you can get a $10,000 fine for each activity, whether it was intended or not. If your data gets lost, you can find yourself paying for that. Government is over-regulating medicine. And regulatory capture is a concept that I introduced into this discussion. I took it from an economic term. It occurs when special interests co-opt policymakers or political bodies, regulatory agencies in particular, to further their own ends. And that's what the ABMS and the FSNB have been doing for years. They've been around for about 100 years now. The Federation sells testing. And now they're not only selling testing, I'm going to come back to it, but they're gathering your data and selling it online to people who want it. That's their source of income. Certification is voluntary. This is an ABMS material here. Of course, if you're certified, you are a golden doctor on the top of the hill there. The reality is that certification has never done anything for me. I have never been asked by a patient if I was board certified. I've been asked if I was the janitor at times, but never that, okay? Am I a doctor? Am I a nurse? Am I a resident? I've had those questions, but board certified has never crossed the table. And I'm a good doctor because I have good training, because I care about patients, and I educate myself. I've taken the boards twice. While in the first slide it said there, what a joke. I took it because when I was at the University of Pittsburgh, they said they would pay me $5,000 a year more if I was certified. I said, hey, I can do that. Back then it was only $300 to take the test. Now it's over $1,000. And so the reality of it is You are good because you've had the training, the residency training, the training from birth on upward. A test doesn't make you better. A test, even the high schools are now going crazy about the test. The SAT has come into question as being a valid parameter to try to decide if people should go to whatever college they're heading for. Again, certification, this is from our federal government. Under no circumstances in a hospital should you be dependent solely upon certification. The federal government long ago recognized that. This is from 2011. It exists on the books. But the reality is there's always going to be opportunity for sham peer review. They're never going to tell you we're not hiring you because you're not board certified. The reality of it is, yes, people will be told they can't work, particularly in locum tenens positions or transfer to cover something, because they don't have board certification. The agents won't pick them up because the hospitals seem to demand it. I'm here to say to you right now, in the hospital I work, board certification is not a requirement. I'm here to tell you at the Cleveland Clinic, board certification is not a requirement. It's highly inducive to being hired, certainly, but it's not a requirement. And as a matter of fact, at the Department of Anesthesia, the head of the general anesthesia is a doctor who is not board certified because she's from Switzerland. And she's applying to become the chairman of the department, and she's not required to be board certified because she's from Switzerland. Only Americans are required to be board certified because the monopoly exists and they've been able to enforce it and scare doctors into believing that yes, you actually do need it. But in reality, what is it? It's advertising. Up until the late 70s, you were not allowed to advertise as a physician, as a professional. This was your opportunity to advertise yourself as a board certified physician, to hang it on the wall, to hang it on the door, to put it in the paper, to put it in the yellow pages. Some of you might not know what that is, the yellow pages. And then we had board certification. Board certification, I'm all for it for two reasons. It gives residents who go through a training program or want to go into a training program the opportunity to ask that training program, what % of your people pass the test? So they can say, is it a good training program or not? And the other thing that it does is it makes, instead of just on-the-job learning, you have to study for the future. And so this is two incentives for people in training. But once you get out there in the real world, you've done your training. I mean, we all learn daily on our patients, but in this day and age, textbooks have become obsolete. I get my information online with Google or Medscape or whatever. So the whole concept, board certification came around the time of the Civil War. It's been over 100 years. Maybe it's obsolete, or maybe it needs to be changed into something useful. Now, anybody who flies sees these ads in the airline books. These are ads. It says board certified. Each doctor was peer nominated and selected. Well, that's got to be great stuff. Look at that picture. I wish I had me on the wall. That's a good one. But it's just advertising. And board certification is no different. If we're being bullied, extorted by these agencies, we have to stand up for them. And if you don't stand up to them, they will take you for everything they can. And 5-6 years ago, I realized that for the German people gave me my profession. I mean, I am here now because society has gotten me here. I came from the inner city. I didn't have money. My education was free in Germany. And I turn around, I feel I owe it to the profession to stand up to this distasteful actions that are going on, knowing as a German-trained person that in the rest of the world it really has no bearing. And then after studying it and publishing about it, the fact of the matter is there is no basis that indicates that certification matters and MOC is being extorted based on certification. There's even less proof, and I'll get into that a little bit. Now, Ron Ben Besset, that's his picture up there, he formulated this Change Board Recertification site, and I want to tell you, all the articles that are relevant for you to think about whether board certification matters or not are listed there. And I can tell you, since January 1st to now, there has been more published and posted on that website than in all of the history before then. It has become, now that we've educated our colleagues about the realities of board certification, people are taking note. And it's not just board certification that's getting doctors down. The Federation is our other enemy, and we need to pay close attention to them too, and I'm going to come back to that. And I, of course, have gotten involved in this for the past 6 years, and I've never been approached by the ABMS or the ABIM because those are the bad players. The Board of Internal Medicine is the biggest board in the country. It's also got the people on that board that have been after this for over 35 years trying to make this happen. And now they're backing off, not because they're good people, but because we're pushing back. And we need to push back and put it where it wants to be. If we keep playing the game, and this is an example, and all the yellow stuff is the bad stuff in there, from the American Board of Pathology, all the boards of the ABMS have similar documents by that. And it says here, it's valid for 10 years, contingent upon timely satisfaction of the requirements of the American Board. And I agree to be legally bound by the foregoing, and it basically says, whatever we say goes. Well, who would sign a deed or something like that? I mean, this is an extortion. You know, the mafia has something like that. Not only do they start with physicians now, but they're making it part of residency training. Family medicine doctors are required to participate. Anesthesia residents must pass the first phase of the residency testing or they won't be allowed to graduate from the programs. It's being indoctrinated. These people are being told that this is the way it is. And the funny part of it is, at the AMA, it's the residents who first started putting the resolutions in because they said, why would this 60-year-old doctor who hasn't been tested in 30 years be able to practice medicine? And I just passed it a year ago. It's logical. There is no logic to this whole concept. The fact that it's being so rapidly changed in these last months, it documents the capricious and arbitrary nature of the whole process. This is the other things. I mean, I don't know what society you're in, but this is the anesthesia newsletter from the ASA. It's in there everywhere. The societies are thick in there for the money as well. They sell the educational components and the boards only do the testing. And the societies are making more money than the boards are. And so you cannot open a newsletter without finding direct and specific advertisements for these educational products for your future certification. And this is directly from an ABMS printout. Fact, ABMS recognizes that regardless of the profession, whether it's healthcare, law, enforcement, education, or accounting, there is no certification that guarantees performance or positive outcomes. This was on their Myths and Facts document, which you might not be able to find it anymore. It was from 4 years ago. They tend to delete embarrassing things eventually. Everyone knows this. We've all done the ACLS, the BCLS, the PALS, the NALS, all this stuff. Every 2 years, you're a board certified physician and God, your hospital wants you to do this every 2 freaking years. What's the story? If you find me pumping on the chest of a patient in my hospital, there aren't enough nurses around, okay? I shouldn't be doing that. I shouldn't have to do that. I resuscitate people every day for a living. But there is the start of all this, was the American Heart Association discovered what a profitable business that was. Now this is from the American Board of Medical Specialties. Dr. Horowitz, the Associate Vice President, and Dr. Miller, Executive Vice President from 2002, they tried to do a meta-analysis to prove that board certification was a wonder. Well, they concluded that few published studies, 5%, even use research abilities to look at the question, but they said more than half supported an association between board certification and positive clinical outcomes. Day follows night, night follows day. That's a hell of an association. It's always there, but day doesn't cause night and night doesn't cause day, okay? If you see association, your first thought should be, I really better take a close look at this because there's a lot of things that could be causing it. And the problem is, because you often only are provided with the conclusions or the short excerpt of many of these papers, they seem pretty convincing, but when you look at them, they're not. Results. Of the 33 findings, 16 demonstrated a significant positive association. Remember, it was more than half. Well, 16 divided by 38 is 0.48. So they're very liberal in how they deal with the facts at the American Board of whatever. That's just the reality of it. They went and they looked, they found 1,204 papers, selected 237, reduced it to 56, and could only use 13 where they found 33 findings that they could manipulate to their advantage and then misstate them in their realities. This is from the Journal of the American Board of Family Medicine. It's a peer-reviewed journal. It looks just like JAMA or anything else, but it's from the freaking board. Now the interesting part is This is James C. Puffer, who makes $880,000 a year running that board. He is also the chief editor on the journal, and he's right there. He's one of the authors, and there's no conflict of interest. Okay? Now, for the past 2 years, I've embarked upon looking for these kind of articles, attacking those journals and saying, what do you mean there's no conflict of interest? There certainly is. And this was in anesthesia, was the same thing. This just came out August 27th of 2015 in my specialty, in the Journal of Clinical Anesthesia. This was the third such report about how wonderful the board was working here. And the fact of the matter was, all 4 authors were from the board. They were making mucho dinero, that's a lot of money in English, and I don't know where I've listed the amounts, paid employees, $20,000, $178,000, and they had no conflicts of interest to declare. And one of the editors, he's on the board of American of Anesthesia, the American Board of Anesthesia. And I wrote them, and they didn't really care much. Then I wrote the publisher, and the publisher wrote them, and then they published it. So the reality is, you got to know the facts, you got to know the laws, and you got to be able to push the buttons that need to be pushed. And this was not only in this journal in anesthesia, but anesthesiology, I did the same thing. And now they start to declare their conflicts of interest, and that's important. Because when you get the journal article and you look at it and you see that there is a conflict of interest, it really takes a lot of the weight out of it. If we had pharmaceutical companies selling us drugs and not declaring the conflicts of interest, it would never happen. But the boards are private corporations just like Sandoz or anybody else selling their products to you, and if you're willing to buy them, I really can't say much about it. I've been waiting for the American board to come after me with a lawsuit, and they never have. Because you can't be sued for the truth. It's just not possible. You can be sued, you won't win. So lifelong learning, that's what this is all about. I'm blessed. I work at the Cleveland Clinic. I will be able to access their library till I die as an alumnus. And I can access any journal, anytime, anywhere, on the internet. And I do that probably every day, at least once. So I'm always up to date. That's the problem that needs to be solved. Physicians in private practice in communities in rural sites need to be able to get online and access the Library of Congress and read more than just the conclusion, because once you open the paper and see all the conflicts, then you know what you're talking about. And if you'd read 2 articles per day out of the 6 million articles published annually, in 1 year you'd only be 82 centuries behind. And I keep getting requests because of my publications to join the Indian Journal of this and all of the pro journals that are, they want you to pay to have your article published. The number of journals is proliferating. We don't need more journals, we need less journals and only good journals. There's just too much opportunity to publish anything out there, and the boards know how to do it. Now, opposition grows. When we first started out, Ron Ben-Bassat and I, Ron was very intimidated because he was an internist and we were dealing with ABIM and ABMS, and they went after him. They never went after me. I'm just an anesthesia doc. I'm kind of immaterial. But it only came after me after I started to branch out into anesthesiology. And I worked at the Cleveland Clinic under the American Board of Anesthesiologists CEO, Dr. David Brown. And he was harassing me, and I took it to the Cleveland Clinic. And after I made my statements, we both got to leave because they don't like shenanigans at the Cleveland Clinic. But any freedom worth having is worth standing up for. I believe that as an American, and I've learned that having lived in Germany and seen what the World War II brought about. So we got it wrong. We got it wrong. We've been pushing for 4 years, and suddenly they got it wrong and they admitted it. And so now I want to point out too that there's another board, the ABPS, that has existed for over 60 years. Gets confused with the AAPS. It's a board. This is a society, and it also exists. And when I tried to bring that into the attention of my colleagues, they certify anesthesia as well, I really caught a lot of flack from the American Society because they won't make money off of this. I mean, it's all about following the money. This was a moment in time that was very important. The AAPS filed a lawsuit. That was the first major stumbling block for the American boards because now it got public attention. It found its way into the news articles. We have been fighting a war in the alternate media for a long time. And the reality is that it's sort of like, in the Middle East, they had their their Arab Spring. Well, we've had our Doctor Spring, and now we've succeeded, and now it's making its way into the real newspapers. And some of the boards are backing down. GYN was one of the first ones. They said, if you're going to be an OB-GYN, you have to treat 95% of your patients have to be female. Well, they do, infertility and things like that, and they stood up and they said, this is nonsense. I'm working in a little town, I'm doing OB-GYN, I got to have a little family practice because, hell, they're not having babies right and left out here in Kankakee, Illinois. So, and then the PA Medical Society stood up. We had a debate out in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. We invited the ABIM and the ABMS to come. They live in Philadelphia. They didn't show. We had to find other people to debate us because they didn't want the coverage. But the Arab Spring won. The coverage has come to fruition. The American College of Cardiology was one of the early people who really got on, or early specialties that really got on top of it. And I want to say to you, look up Wes Fisher and his blog. He's a cardiologist, he's one of us, he's been publishing. He's the man who's gotten most of the facts out there in the internet that have exposed the shenanigans, I like to call them without being malicious, of the ABIM with their luxury apartments, their Mercedes-Benz luxury liners, and the wild spending and high incomes of these physicians. Sleep medicine is another society that jumped on board. And then there was a no MOC petition, and it was started on March 10th of 2014, and by 11/17/14 they'd gathered about 20,000 signatures, and the ABIM and the ABMS, to whom the bell tolled, realized that they were in trouble. This made all the difference in the world. The National Board of Physicians and Surgeons was founded about 5 months ago by a group of physicians, a professor, Dr. Tierstein. He had started to expose the problems with this, and his friend said to him one day, well, what are you going to do about it, Paul? Seems everybody does something, his name's Paul, I don't know why. But at any rate, he formed the board, and he is certifying doctors in all specialties. And now the ABMS finally took note because there's competition in town. The sheriff's got a bigger badge. The criteria for certification, because it's a new board, they don't have the ability to do testing, and they're really not interested in doing testing. If you've been certified by the ABMS, you can become certified with this board for $168 for 2 years and meet their criteria, and they're listed here. You have to send in your CMEs documented. You have to show that you're on a hospital staff, practicing good medicine, and don't have a lot of malpractice, or if you do, you have to be able to substantiate it. It basically does what state medical boards do. How many times do we need to bend over and pay to be told that we're good doctors? Now, if any of you are DOs, we need to form an NB osteopathic PAS, and we need 12 people to sit on the board. I have 5. I'm not an osteopath, but I'm happy to help because I'm committed to the cause. If you know anyone who would like to be on this board, because the AOA extorts even worse than the ABMS, and the DOs need the protection. Many DOs get their ABMS certification, but many of them don't. The alternative needs to be given, or the AOA will never shudder in fear like the other boards have. Then the cost analysis of the American Board of Internal Medicine. This came out just last month. It was printed in the Annals of Internal Medicine, and I'll make it bigger. It costs about $23,600 on average every 10 years to remain certified in medicine. It varies. It can be as much as $66,000 depending on what your subspecialty is, and if you do the basic certification as well as your specialty certification. And it cumulatively costs about $5.7 billion, healthcare dollars, going to waste to keep this running over a course of 10 years. Now, money's getting short for everything. Do we really need to waste $5.7 billion a year on something that has never been proven? And the reality is also that most of this cost means that physicians have to take the time off, not see patients, go off to Chicago or wherever to do whatever it is you got to do to make it happen. And yeah, I think people have died because their doctor was gone for a week when they were living out in southern West Virginia in a small town where they had to go another 40, 50 miles to get their care in some other tiny town. This are the unintended consequences of MOC. If you're taking doctors away from the patients for no good, it must be bad. And we have Kurt Eichenwald, And Kurt Eichenwald is married to an internist. He's a writer for Newsweek. This is the 4th article. Gather your pitchforks and torches, ABMS, the doctors are coming to town. We're fed up, we're not going to take it anymore. And the information, this article is very interesting. He's had a series of 4. You can Google him and read his articles. Basically, Charles, who's a CPA, he's a forensic CPA, has investigated the documents available because these people are nonprofit organizations. You can request their tax documents, and he's audited them, and he's found, pretty fantastic thing. The ABIM is the only board that's $24 million in the hole, while their foundation is $26 million in black, and the only place the foundation gets money is from the board. So if the mafia did that, they would call it laundering. Okay, so and now we've gotten to this point, the American Gastrology Association proposes making their own board. You can make a board, and you can make a board, we can all make a board, and print out wonderful certificates. You can get online and become a certified preacher and marry people. A certification is pretty easy to come by. Anyone can make them. That's really about all they work. They're kind of like wallpaper. American College of Physicians has gotten on board, but they're very closely linked with the boards. They're not doing as much as they should. I want to point that out for you who are members. The American College of Cardiology, though, they're not going to take it anymore. They've focused on this. They've pushed very hard to get rid of the 10-year exam and other things. Even the AMA has adopted principles for maintenance of certification, basically largely due to the fact that residents started with the resolutions at a time when in the physical physician population support was minimal, but now that the masses have swelled, even the AMA has indicated that the MOC program should not be a mandated requirement for licensure, credentialing, payment, network participation, or employment. The problem with the whole MOC program was they came along and they started to say that first it was lifelong, then it was 10 years, and then it was every year, and you could lose your certification because you didn't pay your money, and that would be a problem. From one day to the next, you'd be thrown off staff because you're not MOC compliant, and that's a real problem for physicians because, hey, people forget, time goes by, and suddenly it's time to make your payment again. These are all problems. So replace the ABIM board exam for MOC. Maybe we should get rid of MOC. Maybe we should change it entirely and make it something relevant to our practices, and I will get to that. Open book seems to be reasonable. That's how we do medicine nowadays. When I find someone with a funny looking kid syndrome, I get on Google, I look it up and figure it out before we put that kid to sleep. That's probably what a lot of us do. Google is our textbook these days. All these other things, these CME things, in anesthesia they were requiring us to get it from the ASA, 25%. That's extortion. Why should we have the ASA be in cahoots with the ABA to make us do whatever it is they think we should do? When we went to school, we're born, we're knowledgeable, we're competent. We know what we need to learn. We need to learn what our patients need, not some textbook. I mean, who reads Harrison's from cover to cover every 5 years? I don't know anybody. Okay, now, internal medicine news. ABM severs MOC enrollment from board certification. If you believe that, you didn't read the fine print. That's just for people coming out of residency. It gives them time, the first 5 years, to get on board or then lose it. They're not doing anything good for you. They're just trying to placate the uprising, the Arab, or the Dr. Spring, as we would call it at this point in time. And it's little more than lipstick on a pig, okay? They call it, for me, it's MOCA 2.0. I've written the board, I said, quit sending me your crap. I don't want it anymore. I'm not going to take it anymore. And this is an example. I don't have an anesthesia. I had to pick one. I have one from neurology. And you can see, he's a diplomant of the American Board of whatever. Certification is contingent upon meeting the requirements of maintenance of certification. And the ABMS has sent out letters to the insurance companies, to the hospitals, telling them that every year on April 15th, certification expires unless you're compliant. So if you want to know if your doctors are certified or compliant, you make sure that they send you our document, which we will sell them for $50. Okay? So this is taking the extortion to a whole new level. So we ask ourselves, what should MOC ideally look like? And this is a group of pediatricians, mostly university guys, who've been with us from the beginning. And they said in their ideal system of MOC, panel of experts in each subspecialty would present the news of the year, the things that are really new, that are really important. We have an antidote for Pradaxa. Boy, I'd want to know about that. Might be this much in reading, that much in writing. Read it, maybe take 10, 20 questions on it. That would make sense. Everybody would get updated. And they would sell it to you and it would be concise and it would probably be good because they'd have intelligent people writing it. The quiz would be open book. It proves that you read it if you get the answers right. And you might be reading it as you write the test, but at least you've been given notice that this is the reality. And it would provide a new and review, not one of those, anesthesia in 2015 thick text which changes 50 words every 3 years, and so it's really not a review, it's just a regurgitation. Make MOCA what it was meant to be. No extortion. If they give us back lifelong certifications as it should have been, as it was intended to be, that would be appropriate. It would let people coming from residency go to the residency programs and ask how many of your people pass, and it would make all the residents actually learn about their specialty as they're going through residency and not just doing on-the-job training. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. The ABMS and the ABIM, they'll tell you we're doing this to protect patients, that doctors are incompetent. I'm sorry, I've studied the boards, the state medical boards' actions in West Virginia and Ohio, and the incidence of actions against physicians for anything that you could construe in a generous fashion as incompetence is 0.03%, and yet they're failing 33%. If I put a medical test out there for thyroid that found 33% false positives in a population that's small, no one would use it. Why are we using MOCA? My suggestions would include that it meet all standards for state medical board licensures, and they have been pursuing these avenues, trying to get their MOCA ingrained into licensure requirements in every state. And I would say it's very important for all of us to review the state medical board information every month if we have the chance to keep tabs on the medical boards, because they're being influenced by these people. It should be free to everyone who's over 65 and retired, and it should meet all those OSHA and race, past, nonsense, JCH demands of us. If there's something we need to know, it should be in print. We should be able to read it and know it and not have to fight about it for a long time. And I believe hospitals, when I first started out, every hospital had to have a library. And you could ask the librarian to get you the journal articles, and by God, she'd get them for you. Well, that's fallen by the wayside. It costs too much money. Now me, I have the Cleveland Clinic advantage. I want everybody to have it. If health care is a right, then healthcare education ought to be a right. So what to do about the mockery? You need to contact the ABA or whatever your board is and tell them to quit sending you this crap. Tell them you don't want it. Tell them to stick it in your ear. Stop buying their products. When you hit them in the wallet, they'll understand what's going on. Talk to your colleagues. Follow your legislator. Make sure that legislation is not going on that's going to be derogatory to you doctors in this and in every way, because by God, there's a lot of legislation going on that is adverse to physicians. In Utah, they're proposing hiking the licensure sum of $200 to $5,000 for each renewal to finance the Medicaid program that's been pushed through under Obama, because it's got to be funded. That 10% that Obama's going to stop paying has to come from somewhere, and we're all rich doctors and we're all going to benefit from it, so we might as well pay for it. Yeah, right, I'm going to pay for a program that doesn't pay me what it costs me to take care of the patient and call that a benefit? I'm crazy too. So you got to go home and you got to look at your hospital bylaws, and you got to make sure that if board certification is required, that the NBPAS and the ABPS are also boards, that they are equivalent. There's a lot of problems with that out there. We had the PQRS legislation that went through that has been revoked in the past 2 years. It went through and it mandated specifically ABMS. And if that's the ABMS or AOA certification. If a board certification is good and there's no proof that one's better than the other, then they all ought to be good. And you got to pressure your medical societies to be proactive. You all pay fees to your medical society to represent you, and you need to go to your medical societies to make sure that you're represented, because in many places the societies can turn into old boy. I've done this in Ohio, I've gone to West Virginia, it's a pretty old boy situation there, and I'm fighting hard to get that where it ought to be. You need to get in touch with the colleagues, talk to them and make them aware of the issues that are truly important to us. Now, this is growth of physicians and administrators. Here we see how the population of doctors has been increasing, and that's administrators. Now, if we ask ourselves, why is healthcare so expensive and exponentially going through the roof? It's because we have too many administrators. You used to have a CEO for the whole hospital. Now you got 5 or 10. I'm sorry. Life's too complicated. And who here signed up to be a billing agent when you went to med school? Nobody did. So we're all doing the billing, and then we're doing the ICD code. And then you're the tech support in your office when the computer goes down. Well, no wonder you don't have time to see patients more than 10 minutes at a time. Certification is rampant throughout the United States. You cannot buy an electrical device that doesn't have this on it, and that gets put on there when the company sends their information to underwriter laboratories and says it's a good piece. Well, this is protectionism without legislation, is all that it is. And the boards originated as a protectionistic mechanism. The state medical boards keep people out. They don't invite them in. And these are real issues that deal with us. If we're here, it's okay, but if you're coming in, you won't be allowed in. And the only emblem up here that has any value at all is this one. Because if you have that on whatever you bought and you don't like it, you'll get your money back. None of those will do that. Now, the Federation is important to take under view. They've been around for a long time. They have a lobbying budget of around $200,000, and that's the money they declare for lobbying. They bring in about $50,000 a year selling tests to medical students, selling credential verification to doctors, and basically monopolizing the state medical boards, telling them what they need to do to make medicine safe in their state and profitable for the FSNB. This all started for me with the maintenance of licensure issue. It's not dead. They're still pushing it. And they may come back into Missouri, or they may go into Kansas. I don't know where you guys are from, but the border states are all being pushed by this corporation to sell their products in a big way. And the Interstate Telemedicine Compact is from the FSNB. They wrote the documents, and in West Virginia, they handed them to the state medical board and told them to find a couple legislators to push it through. And lo and behold, in West Virginia now, this compact is law. The governor signed it. It's interesting to note that nurses have had a compact for 25 years. And in that compact, if you are working in Indiana and you sign up, you can go work in Illinois, and you don't need an Illinois license. You can go in any of the compact states and work with your Indiana license. But this compact, if you work here in Missouri and you want to go to Kansas, you need to buy a Kansas license. And then you need to adhere to the Kansas rules and the Kansas law, and you got to be aware of them. And so this is not, it doesn't facilitate anything. It just costs you money. And to be licensed in all states, you'd pay about $5,000 a year to do that through this compact. And there are 11 states that have signed up at this point in time, and others are considering, and they're all, with the exception of Illinois and maybe Minnesota, I would consider very rural states. And Illinois is pretty rural when you get out of Chicago, and Minnesota is quite rural once you get out of Minneapolis. Expediting, you have to stop and think. When I left Cleveland, I thought of going back. I had to get licensed in Pennsylvania and in West Virginia, where I'd been previously licensed in both cases. And I sent them off to Pennsylvania and West Virginia the same day. 3 weeks later, I got it from Pennsylvania. 3 months later, I got it from West Virginia. Well, they signed up on this to expedite it. You got to ask yourself, maybe they're just not doing their jobs, and they're holding this out, the fact that they don't do their jobs, as a means to force you to pay more for your expedited thing. And only 6% of the population of physicians, and this is from the FSNB, their data, 6% of physicians in the United States are licensed in 3 or more states. And I'm in 3 states because West Virginia comes to a point, and it's only 18 miles across where I work, and I have to treat people on both sides of the state line. And I'm not hell-bent on getting into this compact at all. This compact is a boondoggle. As far as expediting credentialing, I got on the internet, and I found 4 agencies that will help you get your license expedited, whereby far and wide the FSNB is the biggest. And they have all kinds of products. The ECFMG, the Flex, the USMLE, the Specs, that's that special exam for those of you who might want to go to Florida or to California if you haven't had a license, an examination in the last 10 years. That's where this whole concept of 10-year certification came from, because 2 states said, well, we want our people to be tested in the last 10 years if they're going to walk in the door. Florida didn't want every retiree to walk in and throw up a shingle and practice 1 day a week kind of thing. Federation Credential Verification Service, very interesting, designed for people from India and Bangladesh and little countries where the medical students, the medical schools come up and they go out of business, so that when they go out of business, your documents have been verified and we can bring them back and say they were good. Yeah, well, that's all well and good, but in Ohio, the FSNB went in there and told the people in Ohio, the medical board, maybe you should make everybody have this. You go to the University of Ohio and you got to have them verify that it's good? Get out of here. But that's they go into the medical boards, they tell them, you got to sell this for us, it's important for you, and now let the doctors pay for it. And the universal application form, when I had to reapply, that's the reason it took so darn long, in West Virginia, on the state medical board's webpage, you click a button and it takes you to the FSNB, and then the FSNB wants to sell you your opportunity to register for a license in West Virginia for $50, whereby when you fill that out, all your data gets put into their data bank and they sell it to the public. Social Security number and everything for $9.95. I'll get to that later. And then the Interstate Medical Licensure Compact is nothing more than a backdoor attempt at the maintenance of licensure. So the green states are those with the universal application. These circles, these indicate that the FSNB gave them money to make it happen. Okay, nothing like a little quid pro quo to make things work. The Physician Data Center, docinfo.org, from the Federation, $9.95. You can get all this information on your doctor, whether he wants you to have it or not. We got it, we sell it. And they've also spun off Data Common Incorporation, another corporate entity. American Board of Family Medicine's there, Board of Pediatrics, all the bad players among the boards, the big boys, they want to take your data and they want to sell it. And I'm sorry, what's HIPAA all about? Well, if you're a doctor, you bend over and take it like a man. If you're a patient, everything's sacrosanct, but it's all medicine somehow. And Walmart, I mean, what am I so concerned about the FSNB? Walmart has plans to bring in primary care into its stores. Nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, they don't have to be board certified. We have to be board certified, and yet we're letting nurses and PAs practice medicine. And the nurse practitioners are not even overseen by the medical boards. They're overseen by the nursing boards. And there have been stories in Washington and other states where they've had these pill mills come up, people have died, and the medical board can't do anything about it. So if we give this all free to the population at large, I'm sorry, we're going to be patients one day and we are going to pay the price. And I think as physicians, we have a duty to stand up for society to make sure that health care is important. And the green states are states where CRNAs are allowed to practice without physician oversight and get paid by Medicare and Medicaid equal to doctors. It's the same pay. So tell me, how is it that nurses are cheaper if they get the same pay? I don't understand that. We're giving the practice of medicine to nurses and other people who do not have medical degrees, and yet we should all be held to the highest of high standards while we're giving it away at the storefront. And we have to protect medicine. And we all know Tom and Jerry. Nobody here is that old, I think. But we're all getting old, and we're going to be patients soon. And we have to worry about this because I was on job at the Cleveland Clinic. An operating room table broke, fell on my leg. I hurt my leg. I was flying to Europe 2 days later. I'd bruised my leg pretty bad. I had to go down to the ER, spend my 4 hours in the ER on my own time for a work-related injury, and I never saw a doctor. I asked for a doctor. It was the Cleveland Clinic. I'm a doctor there. I saw the PA, and the PA said, well, let's get an x-ray. Well, you don't need an x-ray. It's a soft tissue. Well, you're the boss. We got an x-ray. And when I said, what about my pain? Well, you want some aspirin? Yeah, well, that'd be good. 81 milligrams? No, I'd like about 325s if you don't mind. It's because I'm flying to Europe and I don't want a blood clot. So that's what we're dealing with. So we need to monitor our state medical boards. We have to look for intrusions by the FSNB, and they are there. They have a national meeting every year. They pay state medical board personnel travel and travel expenses to come to these meetings. It's a quid pro quo event, and that was what tripped up the medical board person in Ohio. he was double dipping. He was taking the money from the state and from the FSNB to travel to these meetings. These people are not ethical. So, and this is a picture of how we shill for the FSNB on the website. You want to come in and you want an initial application, or you're renewing an activation of one that was been inactive for a year, you got to click fsnb.org to get the freaking form to apply for a license in West Virginia. And the other green states, it's the same thing. I don't know how they're able to put that onto a state site like that, and I'm using the Freedom of Information Act to find the facts, and I've already written to the Secretary of State and the Ethics Commission about this. I'd like answers, and that's what we need to do. We need to take things serious and get the answers and find out what's illegal and make sure that it doesn't happen. And again, I referred to Utah. Come to Utah, pay $5,000 every 2 years. Who else is watching? Why do we need the ABMS? We've got the DEA, $875 every 3 years for a license. I can't remember the last time I wrote a prescription for narcotics, but all the hospitals want me to have it. So, and you have to have a federal license for every single hospital. Well, you'd think the DEA would know who I am if I had just one at $875 for 3 years. The attorney generals are looking after you. The lawyers are looking at. I work in a hospital. Hospital boards are looking after me. I have about 25 people looking over my shoulder. I sure don't need the American Board of Anesthesiology making my life hard either. I would welcome questions at this point in time.